We've got attendees joining now.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this second virtual community forum for North West and West Cambridge. My name is Sharon Brown, Assistant Director Delivery, Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service, and I will be chairing this meeting. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for attending this meeting, which, in common with those held for Cambridge East and North East Cambridge, is a place for an information swap, updates, and a chance to get to know those who are helping to shape our new neighbourhoods in this part of Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire. We acknowledge that we have some individuals who will be engaging with the developments of these sites and will have been involved for a long time, but also that some of the attendees at these meetings will have very little or no knowledge of the sites or who may be new to the area. This meeting therefore acts as an overview, and future meetings will be held every 3 to 4 months. It's likely that, subject to COVID restrictions, the way in which meetings are held will differ as we go forward, but we will be keeping that process under review. The meeting will focus on a series of short presentations from key developers involved in the developments, as well as including information covering education provision across the Northwest Quadrant. As we go through the presentations, if you have any questions, please type them concisely in the question and answer function only, and we will pick these up and relay them to the appropriate person at the end of each presentation. So there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end of each presentation. This is a tight session and it will end promptly at 7:30. But the meeting will be recorded and posted on the Northwest and West Forum webpage. Attendees will not be recorded, but names will be displayed when asking questions. If there are questions for which we need to find the answers after the meeting, these will also be posted on the webpage. Just like to mention that there are a number of council officers present at the meeting who will be helping with responding to questions as required. I'm going to mention some of those now. So we've got David Allett from Cambridgeshire County Council. We also have Rob Lewis from the Education Service at Cambridgeshire County Council. And we have a number of strategic site officers from the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service who cover these particular developments, including Charlotte Burton, Yole Medeiros and Guy Wilson. Each of those officers will introduce themselves as they go through their meeting this evening. We've got a number of other stakeholders present as well. If I could ask that any councillors present make themselves known by just putting something in their question and answer so that we know who is here. So that's all the housekeeping and introduction issues. I'm now going to invite our first speaker to start the presentation. And the first speaker is Warren Forsyth, who's going to update us on the Eddington development. Thank you, Warren.
Thank you, Sharon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Warren Forsyth, and I am the Operations Director for Northwest Cambridge Development. And I hope that you should now have the shared screen of my presentation. If somebody can just give me the nod and say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to give you some background information, as Sharon has already pointed out. So for people who might be brand new to the group, I will be repeating some of the information that we've provided previously as well. just to give you some context before giving you an update of the latest developments on site. So first of all, if my screen will move on. It's very sensitive. There we go. This is an overview of the Northwest Cambridge development phase 1. We are in the process of having discussions about when phase 2 will come forward for development, but at the moment, phase 1 comprises these pieces of work or units, if you like, that make up phase 1. The bold text, which you see runs about 2/3 of the way down the screen, is for parts of the development that have now been completed and have been in occupation for some time. And the lower pieces of information in text that are not bold are in development still or soon to be developed. The most notable one is that we will talk about the hotel a little bit later on in the presentation. To give you a little bit of an overview, we're during COVID times, and that running the site in the normal way, as much as normal could be anticipated for occupants in a residential community, mixed-use community, and paying a lot of attention to the wildlife management, the grounds management. We're seeing quite a large number of people enjoying the open space. A few photographs there of things that are particularly notable at Eddington, including the addition of Voi scooters that have now docking stations at Eddington as well. With regards to placemaking, it's been a difficult year for us, as has been for everybody in terms of getting together groups, so we clearly can't do that. So a lot of virtual meetings, but we are proud to present that the first in-person get-together will be Get Active Eddington, and that has been scheduled for the 24th of July. Of course, that's subject to government guidance and government rules. If we have restraints and constraints that stop us from being able to do that, of course, this event would have to be cancelled. But we have plans already in place, and there are a number of activities from boot camps to yoga, pedal for fun, etc., that are available already for booking. All events are pre-booked online, so that's already available for our restart, if you like, of placemaking activity at Eddington. Just as a snapshot, you would have seen that all key worker housing is complete and occupied. We have about 150 private residential properties now occupied on the site. And we have some of the Hill have retained some of the units for rent as well. And those of you that will know the area will know that Swells Court, which is occupied by Girton College students, is currently at about the 50% occupancy level due to COVID requirements and COVID constraints. So what's the new big message for Eddington is that the hotel is coming soon. Construction is expected to finish in September. An announcement will be made about the opening date. We haven't got that in the public domain yet, but you can work out from the completion of the building in September. That's an actual photograph, that's not a CGI, that the building is now progressing and coming to some point of physical reality. 150 rooms in the Hyatt, part of the hotel, and as part of the Lock Apart Hotel, 180 studio apartments, and some additional retail offers as well, which I think people will be pleased to see in terms of a roof terrace, bar, and a restaurant that will be coming with the hotel development. And then just to summarize, that was what the site looked like in 2013. And this is the most recent photograph we have, which sets out what the site looks like in terms of its current development as we stand at the moment. And then just to say thank you and to take any questions there might be.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And now I think we move forward. We've got some time for questions.
Yeah, so the first question is, what progress on having the medical centre up and running do we have?
The progress with the NHS has been slow. Most recently, of course, because of all of their attention being on COVID response requirements and estate requirements. But I must say that we continue to have a dialogue with them, and we are continuing to see if we can move ahead with getting the centre in place, the GP surgery. I have no date, and until such time as we have a date, we aren't able to announce anything.
I can probably add something to that, Julian, because officers from South Cambs and the city have had some discussions with the various NHS bodies about moving forward with the GP facilities and the health provision on both the Northwest Cambridge development and the Darwin Green development, because we recognise fully that there's not only anxiety amongst the new residents moving into the development, but also in relation to the pressures on surrounding facilities in the area. There are a number of new personnel who are now reviewing this situation within the NHS related organisations. Unfortunately, there are always a lot of changes, but they are putting these now towards the top of their agenda, and that we do expect some meetings to be moving forward in the very near future, and clearly engaging with the developer teams as well as their councils.
Thanks, Sharon. We don't have any further questions in the Q&A at present, but if you think of any as we go through the rest of the meeting, please do put them in. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you. As Julian says, we don't have any more questions. So in that case, we'll move on to the Darwin Green update, please. And so that means Alan Davis and Ray Houghton, if you'd like to start your presentation.
Thank you, Sharon. We're going to split the presentation this evening between BDW3 and an update on the BDW5 and 6 parcels. We're going to first present BDW3 from our architects, and Jordan from HTA is going to give you a quick run through of the BDW3 parcel. So if I can invite Jordan to share a screen just to present that update. Thank you.
Hi everyone. While Jordan's getting up on screen, I'm going to introduce myself as well. I'm Simon. I work with Jordan, and I'll do a little brief introduction to HTA, who have looked at the design for phase 3, and then Jordan, who does all the hard work, can talk you through our proposals very briefly. So HTA are a practice of just over 230 people actually now, and we are all sorts of different kinds of designers. So we're everything from urban designers and planners through landscape architects as well, and interior designers, sustainability experts and graphic designers. So huge range of designers, but we're all focused on designing new neighborhoods and communities. We work exclusively in that area, and have done so for over 50 years now. So we think we have had a bit of practice at it, and something we very much enjoy. I think there's a lot to learn in. We work across multiple offices, and at all scales, and importantly from I think the point of view here, from concept through to completion. So we're very focused on providing deliverable new neighborhoods. So Jordan, if you want to run through our proposals for phase 3, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Simon. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Just to give you a bit of context, you'll all be familiar with the Darwin Green master plan that was outline consent was approved back in 2013-14. And highlighted on that master plan there is phase 3, or BDW3, that we refer to it as. And so this is the phase that we will discuss this evening, and the phase that we've been looking at for the last couple of months with Barratt. You'll also be aware of parameter plans and the design code that were produced at the time of the outline consent being approved. And these purely are there to guide the design and ensure that certain principles are kept. And so we've been studying these obviously and looking at these as we've sought to refine the master plan and begin to work into the detail of that. Some of the main ones here are shown on the screen, particularly around access and the hierarchy of the streets, the density of the development, and then the building heights that's informed by this one here, which has a particular relationship to the adjacent buildings and the existing context to the southeast there. On the screen now is the current illustrative master plan, and to the left, the bottom left, you can see what was the original illustrative master plan at the time of outline consent being approved. And there are a number of key moves that we've started to make in developing the master plan since working on the project, and I just want to take you through those really briefly. So the first one is we've looked to maximize the park frontage, and we've done that by reducing, well, partly by reducing the number of entrance points, vehicular entrance points to the site. So we've done this in conjunction with advice from highways, and are comfortable that the parcels can be served by the single access road. There will obviously be emergency access that will be provided elsewhere on the site. And the other thing that we've done is we've looked to improve the provision and quality of some of the urban squares and the pocket parks that are interspersed around the phase. There is an orbital cycle route that runs through BDW3, this phase, that will connect the local context to the southwest with some of the other parts of the Darwin Green development that will be coming forward and already have come forward, particularly the local centre and phase 1 and some of the green space that's shown there on the master plan. And then there are a number of things that we're also looking to do that I can talk you through shortly, but some of that relates to allotment entrances, thresholds around the site, and some of the design response to the block conditions. And so in developing that illustrative master plan, we've started to move into a bit more detail that begins to give a bit of an idea around the block structure and how the homes will be broken down along the site. I should say that this site is 100% residential. It will all be new homes, and there are roughly 200 homes that will be provided on the site. And so this slide really just gives a bit of an overview of some of the key spatial typologies or key character areas that we are looking to define around the site. And so you can see we've sought to define what we're terming as the park frontage. So the parameter plans allow for up to 4 stories in this location, and there will be a mixture of 4-story apartment blocks as well as 3-story townhouses that look to establish quite a formal character fronting the park that will offer views and amenity space overlooking the park. The other thing that we're looking at developing and working up are these pocket parks. So as I mentioned, we've sought to improve and increase the number of pocket parks around the site. And really these we're hoping will be for the benefit of not only of the new residents that will be on the site, but also local residents, and that will be informed by new connections that will be brought through the site. And so these will be high quality car-free spaces, as I say, that offer doorstep play, perhaps informal play that can be used, that can be facilitated through natural materials. And that's something that we're beginning to look at with the landscape architect on the team. Thirdly, and quite importantly, as I say, we've got the orbital cycle route that runs through the site that you can see diagrammed here in the orange line. And again, this is purely pedestrian and cycle, so completely car free. And we see it as being a really important gateway into and through the site, both from the local context and also what will be the new development at Darwin Green from phase 2, and also from the local centre in phase 1 to the west and northwest. And we've started consultations on that with the WIRE group, the Windsor Road Residents Association, that sits, who are particularly concerned with the junction there, and really welcome the feedback that we've had to date from them. And then finally, there are a number of areas that we're looking at refining along the main streets, and the way that the house and the grain and the massing of the development breaks down as you move from the kind of northwest down towards the southeast, towards the local context, so that we become a lot more contextual to some of the back gardens that we're backing up against along that eastern boundary, and then the way that we're responding to the park frontage, ensuring that there really is a contextual response on each of those boundary conditions. And then, just as we come towards the end of this part of the presentation, just wanted to give you an idea of how the massing and the grain of that development is beginning to shape up. So you can see an aerial overview here of an early massing model that we're looking at the moment, where you begin to have an idea of that formal park frontage and how the undulating mass of the apartment blocks, and then also of the townhouses, and then how that breaks into a slightly finer grain as you move towards the eastern boundary and the existing context and boundary with those homes along Windsor Road, Tavistock Road and Stratfield Close. And then also, just to give you a bit of a flavour of some of the, I guess, the architecture and how some of those units are being dressed. So I should say this is some really early visuals, but this was some work that we put together to present to the WIRE group recently. As I say, this is looking at a study of that entrance at the end of Windsor Road and the relationship with the orbital cycle route that comes through our site, so this gateway. And obviously this is just part of the work that we're doing at the moment. There's lots of other bits of work that we're doing around the rest of the site, looking at the development of the homes and the way that some of the other homes are dressed around the site. But we look forward to sharing a bit more of that with you in the coming weeks, and potentially at future meetings.
And I suppose just to sum up, we anticipate submitting an application late summer, early autumn for the proposals.
Thanks, Simon.
Back to Alan. And
yeah, thanks for that, Simon. Thanks for that, Jordan. So in terms of BDW3, as I say, this was an early presentation to the forum, just so you're aware of where we are. We are at pre-application discussions with the council, so these are our early designs, but it's just to involve the forum so you know where we're progressing. And I'll hand over now to my colleague Ray, who's going to update you on BDW 5 and 6, which is in the northern part of the Darwin Green development.
Good evening, everyone, and I'll just give you an update as to where we are on 5 and 6, which relates to the northern parcels. I think what I'd like to be able to do is just go through a couple of things with you. Hopefully you can all see that. So as just to follow on from Jordan's presentation, this is the 5 and 6, two parcels to the north of Darwin Green 1. We've so far had a very sort of extensive process of engagement with officers, stakeholders, residents, etc. We presented to the Joint Development Control Committee last week, just in terms of an update. And really what I wanted to show you today was some of these sort of changes, the enhancements that we've made since the last presentation to the Northwest Forum back in March. Principally, it relates to the central square here, which has been reorientated to maximise, obviously, those southern views, but also to make sure that the vehicles that pass through, and including the buses, are very much entering into a shared space, although there is a demarcation quite clearly for those for pedestrian and cycle users. This main spine road continues south through 5 and 6 onwards into the Central Park to the south. And this is very much, Spine Road is the central core. The building heights go up to 3 stories through here. And then this is begin to dissipate further east and west. It goes down to 2.5 story and 2 story. I think what I'd like to talk about this evening very quickly, this is a short presentation, is obviously the interface. We have no residents to the west, north or south, and it's the existing residents to the east where I think we wanted to ensure that we had engagement there. So what we've done, we've actually pushed these houses back. The houses themselves along this row have reduced in height, and actually now the distances between the back-to-back distances are approximately 20 meters to upwards. So far in excess of standards that would normally be required. But I think we've also taken into account aspects relating to overbearance as well as the actual physical dimensions, and to ensure that this street has a continuous frontage with attractive design, with parking taken into account where you've got on-plot parking, and that is actually a characteristic that runs through much of the site. We've kept parking courts to the absolute minimum, and we believe that it should also be about ensuring that the car is not king, and so we've got car-free places around the site to ensure there is this connectivity. And that came out also through some of the presentations and the discussion, the feedback we've had, is to improve upon the outline scheme that was approved back in 2013, was to increase connectivity both north, west, and also within the site to its existing neighbours. So that's very much part of what we've sought to do. Hopefully you can see that as well. I'll just try to reduce that a little bit. This is the landscape strategy, but also what it does show through here. You see these large parcels of green to the west, to the central section of the site, to the south, and there's also one to the north. Shows very much these aspects have been approved. So all these details have already been sanctioned effectively by the committee, and the proposals to reserve matters, which we hope to submit at the end of July, relate very much to the residential parcels that you see here in between. So it's fitting those into the existing approved infrastructure. And I think infrastructure is key with this development, and I'm sure there'll be questions about the timing and delivery of that. I'm happy to answer those questions. So that's a very, very short presentation, very quick update as to where we are on 5 and 6 going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those presentations. So we've got some questions in the question and answers box at the moment. Julian, do you want to take us through those?
Sure. So the first one's regarding schools. So our colleague from County Council might want to jump in here too, but it says if the primary school on Darwin Green is not viable at present, what will happen to that land? Same question for proposed secondary school.
I'll take that first, Julian. So in terms of the primary school, there is obviously an update on this later on. And then in terms of the land, we're not foreseeing that the primary school isn't viable. We are looking at the county delivering that primary school. So we don't expect that to be a scenario. I don't know if the county council representative wants to add to that answer at this stage, or if they want to leave it for their presentation.
I was going to cover it in my presentation, so if I'll leave it until then.
Okay. In terms of the second question, the pocket park, the question from Janet Bunker, these parks are approximately sort of 0.1 hectares of open space, but they vary. So a pocket park that we've referred to, they're the sort of sizes of a lap. So they're just small areas for informal play, but there's no sort of set standard. So they could be slightly larger than 0.1 hectares. It just depends on what we can fit in between these areas. And as you've seen from the plans that Jordan presented, there are some difference in size across the areas. So a few will be slightly larger than that.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, Alan, I think the principle we've tried to do is significantly uplift from the illustrative plan. So that was one of our logics for reorganizing the site, was to be able to provide a significant uplift in the amount of open space within phase 3 within BW3. So we've done that from what was in the illustrative plan.
And if I can just add something as well, I think the main difference that I kind of touched on was removing the car from some of these pocket parks. And so for those of you that are familiar with design code, you will have seen that although pocket parks were originally provided within the original illustrative master plan, most of those have had vehicular routes moving through them. And what we've done is we've removed those roads, and so they are purely garden spaces and green spaces for pedestrians, cyclists, completely car-free. And that there is an improved quality of green space that we're looking to provide.
Thank you. And the next question is regarding the cycle connection with Windsor Road. And when will that open? Do we have any details on when that might be?
Yeah, so in terms of that, obviously, as HTA have said, we're looking to submit the application late summer, early autumn. Then obviously it would be determined by the council with a decision next year. We're looking to build in a from south to north direction for this parcel for BDW3. So it would mean that we're talking around about summer 2023, that early phase of BDW3 could be finished, and that would allow the cycle path to be implemented. So summer to autumn, sort of 2023 approximately for the cycle path.
Okay, thank you. And staying on the cycle links, the new cycle link from parcels 5 and 6 to the present development, Briery Walk and Brownlow, plus another development at the Squash Court and the Lara developments, are they finalised? Have they been put in stone?
Don't know if that's something you want to pick up, Ray.
Okay, sorry about that. In terms of Brownlow Road, the cycle links and also the same with Blackhall, they are obviously there's no vehicular access. They are entirely pedestrian and cycle. They are part of the proposal that's also required through the outline scheme. So in terms of they're not new links, they are an expectation that the development would come forward with these links. However, I will qualify that in terms of Brierley Walk, there is no connection now proposed to the existing park that exists on Brierley Walk. We had a consultation with neighbours recently, and it was clear that there was some concern about how that park, which is very much seen as the facility for those immediate residents, would be best served. And therefore, we've got ample, obviously, areas of play for people on 5 and 6. But in terms of the cycle links, as I say, we have full details to be submitted with the reserve masters to show the level of landscaping and also appropriate width of those links for cycle and pedestrian use. Thank you.
Thanks. The next question, I think you've touched on the planning timeline for phases 5 and 6. Do you, if that goes through, do we have a approximate building timeline for those phases?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, as I say, the expectation is we submit the application at the end of July. There is a planning performance agreement that's been agreed with the council in terms of, and that sets out timelines for determination, both parties' responsibilities. There's an expectation it will go to committee in November, and therefore, hopefully, decision would follow shortly after. We would commence on site in January of 2022. And with 411 dwellings, the expectation is that we normally would deliver between 50 and 60 of those per year. So we do expect to be there for the next 6 years plus.
Thank you. Car parking spaces, do you know the ratio between those to houses? How many will they be provided on the development?
Yeah, so in terms of car parking spaces, they'll be policy compliant. That's dependent on the number of beds per dwelling. So obviously a 1-bed has far less parking required in comparison to a 4-bed. On average, the parking requirement for Cambridge City Council is 1.5 space per unit. There is on Darwin Green, there's an overall amount of parking as well. So we've made sure that we've done a parking audit just to make sure that there'll be sufficient parking spaces on the development, but not going over that amount. I think off the top of my head, it's 1,700 across the development. So there'll be sufficient parking spaces, but there won't be an over provision because obviously we're looking to encourage sustainable means of transport, cycling, walking, and use of public transport. There's bus shelters and bus stops on Huntingdon Road nearby, where people can obviously use public transport. So as I say, we've got enough parking spaces on plot, but we're not looking to over provide.
Thank you. And last question we have at the moment is a suggestion regarding a retirement homes. Are there any plans for those?
I don't know if that's something you want to cover, Ray.
No, I mean, certainly the expectation is that this is a housing development, not for a retirement or care home per se. Having said that, the mix of the house types that are proposed obviously cater for a wide range of people, as downsizers, but also particularly I think over the last 15, 16 months has taught us an awful lot about the sort of space that people expect to have, the flexibility of that space within the houses, and the quality of the amenity that's to be provided with that. So that's applicable to all ages. But in answer to the question, there's no specific expectation with the outline for there to be a retirement home.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. That's all the questions.
Okay, thanks, Julian. So we are running ahead of time, so I would really just encourage participants, if you do have any questions, any queries, then please do put those in the questions and answers box. So that takes us on to the presentation update from the County Education Service. So Rob Lewis, if you'd like to start your update, please.
Hi, good evening. Hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm Rob Lewis. I'm the 0 to 19 Area Education Officer responsible for place planning and commissioning education provision across Cambridge City and South Cambridgeshire. And just want to give a quick update on where we are, the different sites. Haven't got a detailed presentation. Obviously, we've got the two sites. We've got Eddington, where there's a new 3-form entry primary school, which is 630 places. Early years, which opened in 2015. One of the unintended consequences of the school opening, and opening with a large number of places, was it had a significant impact on surrounding schools, notably Girton, where about 60 pupils from Girton moved from Girton to Darwin Green, to the University of Cambridge Primary School. And that created significant financial pressures for the school in terms of running the school, and then on outcomes. That's obviously something I will come back and touch on because it's relevant to how we're planning and thinking about Darwin Green primary. We'll see, and the developer there is contributing towards a secondary school in financial terms. And there is a nursery which I believe has opened is either opened or is due to open from this September, which will provide early years places for 0 to 4-year-olds from the Eddington site. And with Darwin Green, we have plans for a 2-form entry, 420 place primary school with early years. We secured planning consent for the school in 2019, and that was ahead of a significant development coming forward. We're very mindful of the experience of the university school opening and putting too much surplus capacity into the system and undermining existing schools. So we've put delivering that school on hold, and we're keeping a watching brief over the capacity and pupil numbers, both from the development itself, but also in surrounding schools. We fully intend for that school to open, and if you were to hold me to the flame, I'd probably say September 2024. Obviously, that's something that we're keeping under review. We don't have a sponsor for the school yet, or an academy trust who will run the school. So all new schools now are open as either free schools or academies. and we have to go through either a presumption process or competition, which is run by the county council, or school will come forward through a free school presumption process, which is run directly by the Department for Education. They will invite bids and they will select who the sponsor of that new school should be. We would hope that we can run this as a presumption process, so we have some control over who the sponsor is and how the school opens. There'll also be a secondary school, which ultimately will be 6 forms of entry or 900 places, which is the same size as Chesterton at the moment. It will be run by the Cambridge Meridian Academy Trust, CMAT, who also run North Cambridge Academy, NCA. They're also responsible for running Northstowe Secondary School at Northstowe and Swavesey as the local schools within their trust. We're in discussion with them at the moment around the opening date, and part of that is again understanding the impact of the school opening on both North Cambridge Academy and Chesterton in terms of pupil numbers, and not wanting to create too much surplus capacity. And again, we're talking there about 2024, 2025. But I say that those are ongoing discussions. And finally, for Darwin Green 2, when it comes forward, there'll be a 2-form entry primary school there. And obviously that site is some way off down the line, so we haven't really given any thought to opening dates for that school. So I think that's sort of an overview of where the education provision is within the Northwest Fringe. I'm sure there are lots of questions, and I think it's probably best to set aside for those questions.
Thank you, Rob. Any further questions on education? I know that this has been an issue that's of very wide interest. Anything else that anyone wants to ask? Any queries about primary school? We've got a question from Janet.
How is the primary provision planned with such unknowns?
Good question.
I think one of the challenges is the length of time we've been talking about these schools and these development sites. So, I mean, I think my engagement began with Darwin Green in about 2006, and I'm sure that discussions have been several years before that. The approach, all the timing and the approach for when we put new schools in, and obviously we're very much reliant on demography and forecasting pupil numbers, and between 2006 and now we've had a whole generation of school children go through. So trying to understand the numbers and the timings is very problematic. The other challenge we have faced has been how schools open has changed with the 2010 coalition government and the move to driving through more academies and more free schools. A lot of the control that the local authority has over opening schools and relationships with those new sponsors and how we can control what we call the published admission number, the numbers of places that are available at any one, within the school. A lot of those controls and level of influence have been really undermined. So whilst there's real benefits to the new system and we get some really exciting schools with new sponsors, it does mean that all of the planning we did through between 2006 and onwards is sort of undermined. And again, it's the time it's taken to get there. All the assumptions we made about new schools being needed and the timing were predicated on pupil numbers, which are now 15, 20 years out of date.
Okay, thank you, Rob. We don't have any other questions. Janet says, have every sympathy with those trying to plan education provision. I think we all do.
Well, thank you.
If there are any other questions, please put them in the chat. Who really does control a school, if a school can open, and how many pupils it can have? Who has that control, Rob?
So ultimately, I mentioned the two different types of process for establishing a new school. Ultimately, the decision is taken throughout with both processes. It's taken by someone called the Regional Schools Commissioner. and they will determine who the promoter of the school is, give the final. And then that school sponsor has to go through quite a rigorous process with the Department for Education and the Education Funding Skills Agency, who they're sort of their agent in discussions, to put together a business plan, financial plan, and eventually sign something called a funding agreement. And the funding agreement will set out how school might expand and grow, and the pace and the overall numbers and capacity. One of the things we know is that for free school process, the department have indicated that for primary schools, they have a minimum basic number for pupils, which is 60 pupils. So they're almost expecting 2 reception classes. We as an authority, and where we go with presumption processes, which we've done for the Marley School on the east of Cambridge, we've worked with the promoter of the school much more closely to try and get, so there might be 60, so we might fund them for 60 places, but that's not 60 places across 2 classes, it's 60 places across all 7 year groups. So families moving into the development can get a place at the local school, and that's not something that the department have really geared up to in terms of their thinking. So yes, ultimately, I mean, the decisions will rest in the first instance with the Regional Schools Commissioner and the department. And then obviously academies and multi-academy trusts have a very big influence on individual schools in their trust. Some work really well with us, others may not, and it's the governing bodies of those academy trusts who, with the Regional School Commissioner, hold most of the control.
So simplified, if the council doesn't have control, is it fair to say that the control is centralised in London via the DO, Department of Education?
Can I plead the fifth?
Okay, that's our questions to date, Sharon.
Okay, thank you for that. So that's our presentations done. So we've now got an update on community issues from Lisa Pollitt.
Hi everybody, so there's a few people in attendance here who I work with quite a lot in the community, so you'll know some of what I'm talking about. But for those of you who don't know, North West Cambridge has got a thriving community, lots of different organisations and churches supporting people. So you've got the Castle COVID Support Association, who've done an amazing job supporting everybody through COVID and looking to offer more community activity going forward. We've got the Eddington Residents Association, who was set up just before COVID, so that was great because they've been able to support residents in Eddington, and they've also supported the Castle COVID Support Association. St Augustine's Church and Community Centre is amazing, and they're back up and running, offering a few groups, obviously in line with all the restrictions. And so is Storiesfield Centre. Again, some groups are back there. And I'm in contact, and some of my colleagues are in contact with residents in Darwin Green via WhatsApp groups at the moment, because obviously there's no residents association yet. However, we have got a bit of good news. Barratt's have said that we can use the land that the supermarket will be built on in September to run a community event for Darwin Green residents with them, of course. So they're just grassing it now, so it'll be ready for us in September. I have got a few slides showing the community centre that's coming in Darwin Green, so I'll just share that now. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. So this is sort of looking at the front of the community centre. So here are the community rooms. The health centre is next door. So this is what it'll look like from the front. And here we have, so the community rooms are, I didn't move everybody because you're right in the way, there we go. So here we have the community rooms over here. So next to the health centre, the library, it's actually going to be a pretty large library, and you've got the retail units opposite. So going to be a corner unit. There's a ground floor and a first floor. There's no shared entrance, so it's all quite self-sufficient. So looking at the ground floor space, you've got the main room, which is 42 square meters, got a kitchenette, oven, microwave, sink, hard surface, and projector, Wi-Fi, that sort of thing. So that could be like little cafes, craft projects, different family activities, some exercise classes, sort of the messy stuff that can happen when you can clear up wooden floor. And we're looking at it in terms of fitness classes up to 15 people, seated with tables about 30, and in rows up to 50. And again, obviously this will all depend on quite what's going on once we get in there. And then on the first floor, you've got a kitchen with a sink. It's going to be carpeted up there, so it will have a slightly different use. So it might be meetings and workshops, groups, classes, talks, that sort of thing. And you can have 40 seated with tables and up to 50 seated in rows. So hopefully you can see all of that. You can see where the lift is and the toilets. So the community rooms are going to be hopefully a paperless facility. So it's going to be online bookings and payments where possible. And there's going to be key holder arrangements for regular users so that we can really get, a lot of the local residents involved as much as they want to be in organising things and coming with their groups. We also want to reduce staff travelling backwards and forwards, out of hours and weekends. There's going to be limited car parking, and we're looking at the moment at how to get around that. So there is an idea about having a cargo bike hire. That's not confirmed yet. We'll be looking at lots of different things that we can do around that. Timescales. So construction is happening right now. It's due for completion in September, and then we've got all the things that we need to do to get it up and running. So we're expecting really, once we've done all of those, we'll launch in January. So we've got all the furniture and all the health and safety, resident engagement. So when we have our outdoor event, we'll be talking to residents about what they'd like to see in there. And obviously giving them the first opportunity to decide what actually happens. There we go. So that's a quick update. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions about any of that.
Nothing at the moment, Lisa. If you think of any questions, pop them in the Q&A. Here it is. How difficult will it be to have flats above?
Well, yes, it will, it will be present some issues, I guess, but I don't know if you've got anything you want to say about that, Vicky.
Yeah, hi there. Well, Clay Farm Centre is in Trumpington, and what we found is we don't really have any major issues with having residents above. It works quite well there. In fact, the residents who live above use the centre quite regularly to get their tea and coffee and attend classes downstairs. Also, it's been built to a pretty good standard, and they will put additional sound insulation in, so we shouldn't have any concerns. Environmental Health have obviously checked all the designs and the plans to make sure residents above don't have concerns around noise travelling through the building from the space below. So hopefully we'll be really good neighbours for the residents who are living above us.
Thanks, Vicky. And Lisa? We don't have any further questions at present, Sharon. If anybody else thinks of anything they'd like to talk about.
Okay, so as Julian says, we're open for any other questions. I think what it would also be useful is if anybody can think of any topics that they would like us to cover at future meetings, then again, please put those in the question and answers box in terms of suggestions, because if there are other topics similar to the education update that you'd like to see covered at future sessions, then we will obviously do our best to make sure that we've got the right people to update on those particular topics. So please feel free to make suggestions to us and we will take those away. I think that's really important. The other thing I just wanted to mention, because we haven't got an update on the West Cambridge development at this particular session, but for anyone here who is interested in the West Cambridge development, I just wanted to mention that it's been a long time in coming, but we are targeting a planning committee date in July for determination of the outline planning application. So that's just a date to look out for. There are two City Council planning committees scheduled for July, so we'll be aiming to get the West Cambridge outline application to one of those, probably the one at the end of July rather than the one earlier in July. So do look out for details of that on the City Council website.
Thanks, Sharon. We've got a few more questions coming in. Just back to the community facilities and noise. Modern building regulations should protect against noise transmission to flats. The more likely problem is in the acoustic property of the room itself for meetings. And I believe that was one of the reasons of having a soft floor, but Vicky, do you know more on that?
I don't know the specificities, but I do know that Barratt's have worked really hard to understand what the space requirements are and how we use it in order to make sure that we've got the right furnishings in place, and that they'll be built to a standard that is fit for purpose. The question about ventilation standards coming up, I wonder if Charlotte might be able to answer that, because I wouldn't know the technicalities.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I think it's a little bit too technical for me as well. But no doubt it will be something that our environmental health colleagues will advise us on in the future if there are any changes to the regulations.
Thanks, Charlotte. We could perhaps take that away and get an update on the webpage after the meeting. Is the multifunctional room on West Cambridge used, and who is responsible for it? Sharon, I don't know if you know that question.
Is that definitely for the West Cambridge development and not the Northwest Cambridge development? No, I don't off the top of my head. It will be the university who will be responsible for any of the facilities on the West Cambridge development. There are no other organisations that are involved in running any of the facilities on West Cambridge. So it will be the university. Yeah, so it was supposed to replace the farmhouse that they demolished to build the new Cavendish. I think we can take that away and then post a response to that on the website following the meeting, because we'll have to check into that one. I'm afraid it isn't something that I'm able to answer off the top of my head, and particularly given, I think, the length of time that the West Cambridge outline has been going on for.
Thank you. Don't have any other questions at present, unless any pop in the next few moments. I think we might be done, Sharon.
Okay, so I'd just like to first of all thank everybody who's attended this meeting. Really appreciate attendance, and to thank the presenters. It's been a really interesting session. So thank you to everyone and all the officers and the organisers of the meeting. So the details of contacts have come up on the slides, and any questions as the one we've just mentioned about West Cambridge that we can't answer at meeting, we'll post the answers on the website. The dates of future meetings will also be published on the web pages, and it's likely that the next meeting will take place in roughly October, November time. We'll see where we are on COVID at that time, keep that under review. You'll also find a link to the recording to this meeting on the web page. So just remains for me to say thank you very much to everyone again, and do enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.